in a situation like what you described, there are entities in the Confederation 4D and 5D that use UFOs to travel, and they will sometimes bring people on board the ships and give them positive spiritual teaching. So that is sometimes what happens. Now, you will have situations in which people have been contacted and they have what appears to be kind of like an abduction. The main difference between a negative abduction and a positive contact is a negative abduction, you will have the feeling like you're a lab animal, like you're basically not cared for, not respected, you're in terror, you're in fear. You'll be probed and prodded and scoop marks on your body and so forth. A positive contact will be something where you feel inspired, uplifted, and you're given a message of hope and peace for this planet. It is a very important thing to point out that many people start out by being contacted by good guys, Confederation entities, and then end up not following the teachings that they're given. And when that happens, if you start diverting from the teachings you're given, for example, many channelers start to think they're the Messiah. It's very, very common. You think, well, I'm talking to the extraterrestrials and I'm getting all these cosmic teachings coming through me, and therefore I am here to save humanity from its evil ways, and I am going to lead us through the ascension, and da-da-da-da. As soon as you start thinking like that, it's a mandate that the negative side is going to start interfering with what you're getting. Mandate. You can't avoid it.
And in fact, this happened to Casey, did it not?
Casey had negative interference with his channeling because he was getting angry at the people who were heckling him about his ability. Because he was not following this principle of brotherly love, love thy neighbor as thyself, which is a basic Christ teaching. That allowed a negative entity that called itself Halaliel, spelled H-A-L-A-L-I-E-L, to start giving him messages. And those were the messages that everybody equates with the prophecy of California sinking into the ocean, pole shift, tidal waves, all this stuff. It has been said emphatically in the channeling from the Confederation, which has a history going back to Edgar Cayce. There's 3 or 4 different sources I've identified from the 1950s that said this stuff. There's sources in the 60s, like the Jane Roberts material from the Seth books.
Jane Roberts was a New Age pioneer who channeled a spirit known as Seth. Roberts sold more than 1 million copies of her books and inspired many. In this vocal recording, we hear her channel the spirit of Seth.
I've said this many times. I say it 1,000,000 times. Here in this class and in my books. You form your reality. Then what is the you that forms this spectacular reality that you know? When will you be willing to admit the greatness that is within each of you, and not cower, and not say in this realm of reality it is not possible, but encounter the greatness within yourselves?
It has been said emphatically in the channeling from the Confederation, which has a history going back to Edgar Cayce. There's 3 or 4 different sources I've identified from the 1950s that said this stuff. There's sources in the 60s, like the Jane Roberts material from the Seth books, the Law of One series in the 80s, and then my material since then, Carla's material, she's continued channeling since then, and a few other sources, maybe Dr. Norm Milanovich's first book, We the Arcturians, etc., in which there's a positive message that says you're not going to experience pole shift, you're not going to experience terrifying cataclysms. This 2012 thing is about spiritual growth, right? If you're trying to grow spiritually as a person, why? If you believe in reincarnation, why would you be spiritually growing? Are you just going to reincarnate and keep redoing this over and over again? No. You get to a certain point where you've learned everything you can learn from being on Earth, and you're ready to go and do something else. You're ready to go to a higher place where you don't have to suffer so much. I mean, you've probably noticed in this video, my hands. They were worse in the last taping, but they're still not looking very good. It's not because I got spray paint on myself. This is scarring from poison ivy that I had. I'm not immune from having karma. I'm not immune from having really bad things happen to me because sometimes I don't figure out what I should be doing. What's the best use of my energy, my time? See, it's very, very common that you see people involved in channeling have their lives collapse because when you start giving a message to humanity, you have to live by it very strongly, and if you don't do that, then there's very serious repercussions. The questioner of the Law of One series, Don Elkins, kind of dwelled a little too frequently on the negative side because there were negative entities attacking their group, trying to kill Carla, the one who was actually doing the channeling. It's very difficult to be involved in this work. In the process of doing our film, several of the people involved in the film have had very serious health problems that almost killed them, actually.
And this is the film, the Convergence film
yeah.
that you're working on? So maybe you could explain just in a short way what that film's about and what you're involved in.
Well, the purpose of the film is primarily to express to people in an entertaining way that our minds are interconnected with each other. It's a very rudimentary but very important principle that you have to be able to absorb to understand how we're interconnected. The conventional person has had some kind of ESP at some point in their life, but they're not really sure if it's real. Once you understand that your mind is like a radio tuned into other people's minds, it's not separate from other people's minds, and when you think a thought, it radiates out into your environment and affects the people around you, that's a very powerful principle. So the desire of our film is to bring this knowledge out to the public without going into UFOs and without going into any of the really esoteric stuff I've been talking about with you guys. But I have put together a really elegant, fascinating body of scientific data showing how the mind is a conscious energy field. And we've arranged it into a trilogy of films. The one we're doing now is the first of that trilogy. It's
Great, but so this circles back around to the fact that that some people involved in the making of this film, you're saying, are being sort of attacked by a certain degree of negativity.
Yep.
And this is really fascinating. And maybe you could talk about what people can do who find themselves on a good path and yet they get this escalation of the negative side in which they need to protect themselves.
That's a really, really important point. A lot of the people who are going to be seeing this videotape are going to be experiencing negative greeting in their own lives. The more involved you try to get in healing and evolving this planet, the more negative greeting you're going to experience. There are basically two ways that you can solve negative greeting. The first way is to abandon your quest. If you're really getting your butt kicked and you're trying to do something for the planet, you can basically drop out of the race, get a normal job, marry, have a child, become a muggle again, if you want to use the Harry Potter term, and kind of get out of the game, and the negative greetings will stop. They'll leave you alone. You won't have to go through all this hell. The other way is to be really, really diligent. If you want to be in service to the planet, it takes a life commitment. You can't go in and then pull out easily. One of the things that's important is the principle of honor again. If you make a solid commitment that this is what you're going to do, that you're going to be a spiritual teacher, you're going to be somebody who's going to try to evolve consciousness, you can't sort of be into it one week and then not into it the next week. You have to stay consistent. It's a spiritual path. So it also is very important that you live by your principles. I have heard many, many stories, even back from the early mid-90s, of people who went on seminars with channelers. And the channeler is giving one message to their followers in these groups, but then acting very nasty towards their people, like on the tour bus. Don't talk to me, get away from me. And there's even one case in which it was a female where she was experiencing horrible karma on this trip, burning herself, falling, and people were realizing that this was because she wasn't living by her own teachings, but she completely wouldn't accept that. And the guy who I knew who was talking about this was one of the members of the trip and was actually heckling her about it, which is not a nice thing to do either. But in order to avoid negative greeting, the most important thing I can tell you is to choose your battles carefully. Don't get involved in something that you don't really have the time or the desire to complete. No one is requiring you to become some type of world figure, world savior. The most important thing that will keep you from negative greeting is preserving consistent harmony in your lives with yourself and with other people that are close to you. Negative greeting will happen to you when you lose the harmony with the people you're closest to, when you start arguing with them, bickering with them, attacking them, when you start getting selfish, when you start getting jealous, when you start feeling greed, when you start saying, I want to do this basically so I can make money because I want to spend money on myself. You earn money to serve. You don't earn money to gratify yourself, to go off to Vegas and play the slot machines or to have a prostitute or whatever. And that's why in the Law of One Contact, the group was told over and over again, guard the harmony in your group very carefully. Don't let yourselves get into arguments with each other. Don't let yourselves fight with each other. It's all about the attitude. It's about maintaining your frequency. And the reason why this happened to me is because I didn't maintain my frequency. I let certain things really get me upset, angry, and my hands got scorched. So I'm not above it. It can happen to anybody. And
right. I think that's really great, you know, for people to hear, because it's clear that you're on this kind of a path, regardless of where you are on it. And we're not going to make any suppositions about that. But what's important is that people begin to develop tools to protect themselves as they do journey. And there are going to be a lot of people watching this that are on that same journey as we are.